So today I wanted to talk about API architectural diagrams and how they can be really confusing to look at sometimes because uh, none of them can be identical, even though sometimes they show the exact same thing. For example, I have three architectural diagrams that I'm going to show you today, and all of them are very confusing to look at. They're really not all that confusing, but for example, one shows HTTP and REST, while they're both RESTful calls, or REST calls, technically not RESTful, but REST calls. But why point out a REST call separate from HTTPS when you're going to be making a REST call over both of them for an API call? And it's confusing, and it doesn't show the request versus response and the call flow. The second one that I have is it shows bidirectional calls all over the place, and there are a million different bidirectional calls, and you can't keep track of the call flow on any of these and what's going on. It makes no sense what's going on. Only the programmers on the back end know how that call flow works. And the third one, it's completely incomplete. It just shows where the request is coming in, and it doesn't show anything beyond that. So I wanted to show you a little demonstration of how I do my architectural diagrams to show the full call flow of how everything works and how I lay things out and why I specifically do things this way. So come on along and I'll walk you through what I call target mapping diagrams and why I do things this way and why some people have started adopting this methodology as well. So let me show you what I'm doing. So network diagrams, for the most part, do not show the flow. They do allow you to hook up pieces and show how the call flow is supposed to move in a specific direction, but they don't show in which instances that call flow moves back. It just shows unidirectional or bidirectional movement. It doesn't show in which cases that is supposed to move backwards. For instance, at which time does that movement go backwards to the server or to the client? But it doesn't give you the room to show what the bidirectional movement is for in maps. So what I ended up doing is I had to create a different kind of map called a target map. Now what the target map does, let's do this, and I can show this really, really quickly, is it not only shows, so here we have the client web server, and we have a load balancer or an API gateway if you wish, and multiple web servers that the load balancer, API gateway / load balancer would handle, as well as a shared database. And we can even call a master and slave database on here. And we put these all on the same level because these are all shared resources. These are shared resources, and these are all the same resource. It's just duplicates, but these are all at the same level. This is a different level, and this is a different level in the architecture. And this helps you to understand what level that the call flow is at too as well. So up here you can see that from the client, I'm making a request to the load balancer / API gateway. And from here, the load balancer then distributes the calls. And it distributes to those three servers, which, call those databases. We don't have to be exact because we're showing that it's sharing those databases on this exact same level. And then we can also, let's go over here, and I'm showing that those go to a message queue. Now, I'm not labeling each one of these, but you can see what I'm doing effectively. And then, now this is where this this change comes in handy. And I can show from this point, I can go back up to here. I want to change that stencil a little bit. Now, normally what I would do is that I would use the curves of the lines to integrate this a little bit better, but you see what I'm doing here. The other thing is that I can now see that the central version of truth is at the API server. So what I would normally do is that I would then say, okay, now the central version of truth is the API server. I can now take this, move this to the outer ring, or closer to an outer ring, move these to an inner ring. Okay, sorry about that. I had to go ahead and reconfigure those lines real quick, but let's zoom out here a little bit. And you can see what I did is I moved the API servers now to more of a midpoint so that you can see that they're the center version of truth, or the center point for the request and the response. So you can see that the call flow now meets at the API center. And this is why I call it a target map, is that you can see now where they meet, the request and the response, and what the flow actually is. And this is more important to me, to see that call flow, to see where everything meets and corresponds and redirects, and where the API request and response moves as it goes around your network. So let's break down the final target map. So as you can see here, I'm going to bring up my final version of what I did from what I just showed you. I cleaned everything up and I did a much nicer version. But this is what I actually generate for my target maps. It's something that's similar to this. It's just much cleaner and nicer. You can show, I can show the request as the first part of the target map. The response is the second part of the target map. I can show where I do my redirects. I can show where the client response is. And you'll also notice that the proxy and the message queue are on the same ring of the target map. That's because the proxy is basically the input proxy, and the message queue is the output proxy for this. They basically do exist on the same ring of the map because they handle similar processes, but they handle input and output for the response and request. They do different things, but in a similar manner. They're handling communication, but different parts of the communication. One handles the input, one handles the output services. And the API server is the central version of truth for the communication, which is why it's on the center ring. And this really helps you to understand all of the communication call flow for your network map for APIs. And that's very important in understanding your call flow for network mapping and for your architectural call flow, which I strongly stress understanding. I mean, people draw network diagrams all the time, but they never really understand the call flow. It's something that, you know, when you onboard new developers and onboard new people all the time, it's like getting your mind around the call flow and how everything is working and calling each other. It's difficult to do. But with something like Target Map, which really was my own creation because I needed to be able to show people in a simpler, easier way how to do things. This was the easiest way I had to do it. And it showed people, you know, via rings, which services were related, which was the central version of truth, how the call flow worked. And as you can see, it's very direct, it's very simple, and should be very simply to understand. But if anybody has any problems understanding this, please make comments, send me questions. I'm on LinkedIn and whatever, and you know, I'm always available. So hopefully this was pretty informative. If not, send criticisms too. And I'm always available. And I'll see you again next week. Take care.